Hello again. This is the appendix, the sequel, the follow-up video to our previous video. And what we realized when I was talking through all the things that had changed, that we had kind of hidden or skipped the place where we probably spent the most work, which were the structural improvements to base Oath that allowed all of the expansion stuff to be as good as it could be. So when you get your copy of New Foundations, you're going to get two rule books. One of them is like the old playbook, but it is complete with all of the rules, some of the rules that were only previously in the law, as well as all of the rules of New Foundations in one book. You're also going to get this booklet called Welcome to New Foundations, and it has this big bit of red text that says, read this first, or read me first. Read me first. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to instruct you on how to kind of convert your kit to a New Foundations kit. And then after that, it has all of these little pages that talk about adjustments to the base game, just so you aren't surprised when you're reading the rule book and you're like, is this a little different than the last, how it used to be? It is different. Now, when I first sent this draft to Josh, I had these like cheeky speech bubbles in the margins where I kind of just talked about why we changed all these rules, but Josh hated it. I mean, he didn't tell me he hated it, but they were deleted the next time I saw the file. But joke's on you, Josh, because I'm making this video anyway. And we are going to talk about those changes. And so what I'd like to do is give you a little overview of the changes of base Oath, the changes that we made to base Oath. And I'm going to do it the same way I do it when I teach the game at cons. And I've been playing a lot of New Foundations at cons. And the first thing I like to do is I basically just start with the player board. So Oath had these kind of giant player boards, which had all sorts of text. They were very useful and they were very big. And the first thing that you are going to notice when you look in your copy of New Foundations is that the new player board is much reduced, very small. But don't worry, this shouldn't freak you out. It should excite you. It should open you up to the possibility that all of the game of Oath is still in this little player board. And if you need help, if you miss all those words, we have these little aid cards. And the aid cards actually describe all of the core actions of the game. So what I like to do when I teach New Foundations to players is I give them their new player board and they say, didn't this used to have all the actions on it? And then I hand them this little booklet. And I tell them that we're going to go through, even if they've played Oath before, we're going to go through all the actions from top to bottom. And I'm just going to describe how they work. And I will flag moments when they're a little different. So that's what I'm going to do with you all right now. We're just going to talk about every action in Oath, and in the places where they're different from the base game, I'm going to talk about why they are different. So let's start with search. Search isn't different. It's exactly the way it's always worked. Next, let's do travel. Now, travel looks like it's the same. So travel says, move your pawn to a different site, supply costs as shown, based on your location. When we revised all of the sites of the game, we adjusted these site powers to mostly just influence the travel action. So if you're traveling to a mountain now, that costs more supply. If you're traveling to an island, which is a new site type, that costs a lot of supply unless you're traveling from another island or from a coast. So we went through all of these sites and we said, you know, the icons, the site powers that make the most sense are the travel icons. Now, there are other ways we can make sites feel different from one another, such as their card capacity, the number of relic slots they have, and this is a new feature, their defensive capacity. So sites themselves underwent a little bit of a rework. It would honestly take, like, I don't know, a half an hour chapter in a large documentary about why sites changed the way they did. But you should know now a few things. So I'll use the solitary pillar as an example. Actually, I'm going to get a different one because solitary pillar it doesn't have all the juice. Okay, this is crazy because I'm going to screw up this kit. Okay, we're going to compare a couple of sites just to give you a sense of how sites kind of changed. So here we have the solitary pillar. The solitary pillar is a plains, which means it doesn't affect travel. It's got 2 secrets on it. This was something that happened a lot in the base game. You put 2 secret tokens right on solitary pillar. However, to collect the secrets, you have to be alone at the start of your turn. So previously you just had to visit there, but that meant that all of the resources on sites got hoovered up right away. Not anymore. You've got to be the sole player at the start of your turn. Sites also have a variable amount of defense dice associated with them. So this allows us to separate the solitary pillar from the mountains without having to create a bunch of weird special cases. And then in the bottom corner, you'll note that there are some relics and there's a little backpack with a number on it. We'll talk about that later. The last thing to mention about sites is they have a variable number of bandits. So previously there was just kind of one bandit at every site. Now sites at the start of the game get bandits based on the number of cards that could be at the site, its card capacity. So you can compare the solitary pillar with here, the Fair Isle. The Fair Isle has got one relic on it, one relic slot. It has 2 card capacity, which means it's going to start with 2 bandits. It starts with 3 coins. It's a wealthy site. That's very nice for people of the Fair Isle. And then its movement icon, it's an island type, which means it costs only 1 supply if you're coming from another coast or another island. But otherwise it costs 2 additional supply, which is that red circle. And then in the top corner, you'll see that there are 2 blue dice pictured. That means attacking the Fair Isle is a lot more difficult than attacking the solitary pillar. So again, the travel action didn't really change, but it's an excuse for me to talk about sites, which became so much more expressive. So the campaign action, the big change, which I'll just start with the big change, is that the defense dice, the blue dice, are always rolled last. So the attacker is going to roll their orange dice. Just a super normal amount of dice. This is why we put extra dice for battles like this. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's
they're
a lot
stacked
of.
up.
Okay, so
Oh no, that is so many hollow.
It's a pretty bad roll for you, Kyle.
They're going to make their sacrifices if they wish.
Yeah, I'll kill all these guys. I don't know them.
Yeah, that's fine.
Work for you.
Well, and they're going to usually declare a number. So they roll their dice, they make some sacrifices, and then they'll say,
it's 19 is your total. Throw those in your bag.
The defender then rolls their dice and will tell the attacker if they sacrificed enough.
All right, Josh, 19's the number to equal.
Easy.
Plus 3.
Oh no.
Roll
12
this.
plus 3 is 15.
Oh,
That is
no.
actually not enough.
This means sometimes you will sacrifice way too much of your army. Sometimes you won't quite sacrifice enough. And I love watching players excruciatingly choose, oh, how risky do I want to be? Previously, every oath battle was always like won by a nose. And that's fine, but it doesn't feel like it fits the theme of the game. So again, the core change to campaign is just the blue dice get rolled last. Yes, that means you will sometimes make mistakes. Not mistakes, miscalculations maybe. That's part of oath. So there are a couple other changes to campaign that make it a little easier to teach. So one of them is that when you campaign, you either choose a campaign of conquest, where you're only targeting sites belonging to the defender, or a camp raid, when you're only targeting another player's pawn. When you target a player's pawn, you are engaging anything in their player area. The defenders are the pieces on the player's board. The stuff you can target is stuff in the player's area. If you're targeting conquest, you're only targeting the pieces that are on the map. That means that you never have like the super location of a warband that is both defending a camp and defending a site. Now you have to choose. This means at the end of your turn, if you are worried about your sites, you need to get your warbands on the map. And if you're worried about your camp, you need to put them on your board. This is a lovely choice that creates all sorts of interesting decision points in the game. If you are successful in a camp raid, there's a couple little things that happen. The biggest one is that any face-down cards that a player has get discarded. So if you see a player walking around with a face-down vision that you think is the conspiracy, say something. The last little campaign adjustment that was added is if you have face-down battle plans, like a defensive battle plan, you can reveal it in the activate battle plan step. This means that you kind of can use them like ambushes or trap cards. It's going to be very powerful, very climactic. However, be aware that if you lose that battle and you revealed a defensive battle plan and it was a camp raid, it still gets discarded because any card that you had face down at the start of the campaign is a card that gets discarded. Okay, so that is the campaign. Let's talk about muster. So muster had a pretty simple change, which is that we just moved it to the trade logic. So when you're mustering, you get one warband for the muster action plus an additional warband for every matching advisor. Now this was a change. It sounds so small, but it was agonized over. For months we worked on this thing. The main issue that I had was that I didn't like that all players had the exact same mustering portfolio. I wanted a certain player to have feel like something like a homeland, where they could always run back home to places where their cards matched, raise a big army, or they could find themselves in a spot where there were very few cards that matched and they were forced to take really horrible trades, one favor for one warband, which sometimes you will have to do. It also makes it a little bit easier to teach. You can just tell people, hey, muster works this base logic. When you start to teach the trade action, you just tell them it works like muster. All right, let's talk about trading. Trading is half changed. So the trading for favor works the same way. Put a secret down, you get one favor from that bank plus an additional favor for every matching card. Trading for secrets is a little different. So in the base game, trading for secrets, you would spend 2 favor and then you would get secrets equal to matching advisors. Now you spend 1 favor and burn 1 favor. This change is really, really, really critical. So you actually set up the banks a little bit different in new foundations, and it introduces some extra favor. When you're trading for secrets though, every time someone trades for secrets, a favor gets burnt. So that means by the mid game, usually the favor is back to normal oath levels, and by the late game, it's a little bit lower. This gives a nice narrative arc to the game, and it fixes an essential strategic problem. Previously, if you were playing a game for the Darkest Secret that had a lot of secret generation and kind of like economic racing, players would just generate sort of infinite secrets. And what I didn't like about that is if there were 2 players who had the exact same portfolio, let's say, I'm playing a game with Ted and we both have 3 Discord advisors, we are pumping up the Discord bank, and then secrets are flowing out, and then we're trading and getting that money back, and it's a completely virtuous circle. And that isn't what should be happening. We should be burning down that bank slowly together. And so now what happens is when the secret race gets engaged, players have to be very mindful about when that bank is going to run out of money and start looking at what is the secondary bank you're going to start drawing from. So it gives a lot more texture to games that involve aggressive secret generation. I really like that change. It's super subtle, but I think for people who've played a lot of Oath, you'll kind of immediately realize how much it improves that part of the game. Okay, so next up on our little list is the Forge action. Forge action, you might ask. What's that? It's got a new icon, another beautiful Kyle icon. And the Forge icon is a little anvil with a crown on it. And here's how the Forge action works. Certain sites have 3 capacity, which means they have no relic slots. These are usually big cities or homelands in the game. All of these sites have the Forge icon. And the Forge icon says this: if you control the site and the site has 3 empty cards on it, you can take the Forge action. There's a cost listed on the site. It's usually some amount of favor and secrets, totaling 3. You put 1 resource on every card, and then you get to draw a new relic. So this provides players with a way of generating relics. It is expensive though. And here I should talk a little bit about relic flow in the game. So one of the things that we changed in the game is we now have this lovely Atlas box. The Atlas box holds all of the not in play sites. Sometimes sites have powers like Ancient, which causes their cards to be kept from game to game, even if they're not ruled by the winner of the game. And sites keep their relics. At the end of the game, all of the relics that were held by the losers, they all get shuffled together into a discard pile, and then they get reseeded onto the map, which means if you played a game with Megan and she lost the game and had the Bandit Crown, the Bandit Crown is probably going to be in one of the sites that was in the game. Now, depending on how the empire grows, it could be lost for a generation or 2 generations or maybe 10 generations. But when you stumble on it in a future game and say, oh, I'm at the mountain was in that game with Megan, and there's a relic there, it could be the Bandit Crown. This means that the relic economy in the game is like almost zero sum. You sort of see the same relics from game to game. They get associated with the different sites, but there are some places where relics can get introduced and they can get pulled out. So if there aren't enough relic slots in the game, relics will fall out of the game. The winner gets to store their relics in the reliquary. That's actually what the reliquary is for now. It's essentially like a relic sideboard. And critically, if you want to put some new relics in the game, you get a forge. And so forges allow players to change the kind of relic character of the game and sort of choose what should get remembered, what should get forgotten. And that actually leads me to relics in general. The relic slots on sites now have a little backpack icon with a number. That icon is the recovery difficulty. Now that is something that is not present in the base game at all. I always had a little dissatisfaction with how relics were gained in the base game. Every site had like a custom relic cost to it, usually some amount of secrets and favor. Sometimes you'd be putting that favor in a bank if it were homeland or something. And if you wait long enough in the game, buying a relic doesn't really cost you anything because you know you can just raise that favor later. And it also meant that the relics were usually things that people got in the mid and late game. Usually they would wait till they had a bunch of money and then they would go hoover up a bunch of relics, have a bunch of relics, not even really worry about the powers because they were just trying to achieve a vision or something like that. That didn't feel right. I wanted a relic to be something that a player might take a risk on getting really early that could define their whole game. So the way relic recovery works now is if you're at a site with a relic, you're welcome to peek at that relic like normal. And then you can spend a one supply action called recover to attempt to get the relic. Every time you attempt to recover, you roll 2 blue dice and you total the number of shields. If you have equaled or exceeded the recovery difficulty, you get the relic. If you haven't, you are allowed to spend an additional supply to roll an additional 2 dice. And these dice stack. So maybe you roll 2 dice and they're both blanks and you haven't improved your prospect at all. You might want to spend a 3rd supply. With that 3rd supply, maybe you roll 1 blank, but the other side turns a multiplier and you go from 3 to 6 and meet the recovery threshold, and then you take that relic. In essence, relics now cost supply, and supply is something that players have a surplus of in the early game. It also means if you're spending time getting your relics in the early game, you aren't spending time getting your second secret or developing your favor engine or your advisors. And this means that players are now coming into the mid-game with much more divergent positions. And it means that the relics that you get are going to be a larger part of your player identity. So this really helps like flesh out the sense of each player's particular character. Okay, lastly, the challenge action. So while we were working on this expansion, we spent a lot of time thinking about how the banners worked in the base game. And I was always a little haunted by what happened to the banners in the development of base Oath. So the banners that are in the final game are really interesting, but they're also very complex. And their complexity came because testers and myself, we just kind of found ourselves drifting to wanting more and more articulated mechanisms. In the early drafts of Oath, the banners were really, really simple. They essentially were auctions for a resource, and then they gave you a special power. So what we did is we tried to return to that. So the banners themselves, if you just look at the text on them, they're a lot simpler and lighter than the other banners. And they have a very simple way of operating. So let's start by talking about the People's Favor. So the People's Favor, pretty straightforward. If you want to recover it, you need to be either at the site of the player who holds it, or you can be anywhere if no player holds it. You have to spend more money than is currently on it, and then the money that was on it is going to get deposited back in the banks using a new keyword, which is return. And then the power of the banner of the People's Favor, same as it has always been. When playing a card to a site, you can choose to discard first, easy. You no longer have to worry about it flipping though. And its defensive value is now fixed at 3. This means if you're trying to take it in a camp raid, you're spending 2 blue dice for the pawn, an additional 3 for the banner. This stops us from getting into ridiculous situations where once the banners had 8 or 9 blue dice associated with them, there was really no way to take them, and it was silly. So we kind of said, what is a medium difficulty for taking these things, and then just fixed it at that. Helps the early game, helps the late game too. And then, of course, as a minor action, you can just deposit favor on the banner without trouble. Now, the banner no longer flips over. We had the kind of mob side earlier, and you had to feed it each turn. We got rid of that simply because players had a really hard time remembering, and all of the mechanisms of favor generation and all the texture on moving around the map and stealing this, it already does the work of making it feel like a thing that is hard to hold. Now, there is a variant side of this, which is the Grand Council side of the people's favor. This is activated by one of the foundations. You can see the last video to learn more about foundations. The Banner of the Darkest Secret works in a similar way, except with secrets. Critically, when you take it, half of the secrets that are on it get deposited to sites, and then the rest get returned to the previous player. And the special power of the Darkest Secret is now very different. The power of the Darkest Secret says that you can basically teleport between sites that have secrets on them. So if you've been depositing secrets at sites, or if you're playing a map that starts with a lot of secrets, this is really powerful. Now, this teleportation allows the player with the Darkest Secret to hop around the map, which can be very good for their own secret generation or for getting other objectives. However, if another player takes it from you, it's going to force secrets to be dumped on the map, and it's going to create more opportunities for the other player. So in both cases, these got so much easier to explain and easier to play with. And we also got to make them real big. Speaking of them being larger than usual, because they will often end the game with kind of 6 to 15 secrets or favor on them, depending on how aggressive the game was. We've included ×3 favor coins and ×3 secrets, which are a different color, so it's easier to very quickly see how many resources are on those banners. Lastly, I just want to say a quick word about the ergonomics of play and some of the UI that we worked on. So on this player board, you can see that the raid die that's in the corner lists all the things that happen, which is very nice. We still have a slot for the visions. All the visions got a great little layout refresh. They look really clean right now. So kudos to, I feel like Patty did it, but I can't remember. Maybe it was Megan. Patty, did you do the visions? Yes. Okay. Kudos to Patty for doing a great job on the visions. They look great. We made 2 little adjustments here. So first, the vision of Sanctuary, as well as the oath that is associated with it, only counts relics. It no longer counts relics and banners. Again, that was about making those games feel different from the games before it. And also, the game has slightly more relics in it than it had in the base game. So in the base game, it was very possible to be in a world state where there was kind of only 2 relics or 3. Now the low bound is like 4 or 5. At various points in development, we had lots of relics in play. We actually toned it down so it's quite close to the base game in the final form. But because there are a few more relics, it allows us to make this vision a little bit more crisp. And then lastly, or last among the vision changes, we have a new conspiracy. Now, the problem with the conspiracy is that it used to be quite complicated. Now it's very simple. So you can just steal something from a player at your spot. That's it. If you're walking around with a face-down vision, someone's going to catch you. If they don't, you go up to their site, you flip the conspiracy, you take something from them. I found that all of the preconditions to the old conspiracy and to the various variants during development, they were all interesting, but they actually weren't dramatic. And so we decided to lean a little bit on the drama, and every player knows that one of those visions is the conspiracy. So you always walk into a game knowing that there is a skeleton key in the top half of that deck that could come out and could disrupt things. And then the last thing, just a little UI improvement. On the reverse side of these player boards, the citizen side, we decided to write all of the citizenship rules. This is like the most thumbed to page in the old rulebook. We actually went through all of the imperial laws and simplified them and readjusted them so they're much easier to understand. We grouped them under kind of thematic names so you can deal with the seal of the empire, the chancellor's eye, things of that manner. They're all listed right here for ease of reference. And then on the chancellor board, they have kind of the chancellor variant of these things. And that's because, while players are going to become pretty familiar with the actions that are described on the aid sheet, usually the citizenship rules, they're only going to become familiar with when they are a citizen. So we just stuck them right on the board. And look, there was plenty of room. We didn't even have to make this board larger. Okay, so that is like a quick flyby through the changes of the game. And hopefully you got a sense of how, by making these structural adjustments, all of the additions to the content, the additional edifices, the legacies, the foundations, they all sit very nicely on top of this like slightly improved foundation. So hopefully that gives you a sense of why we made these adjustments. Again, when you get your copy, you'll want to start with this first booklet. And I just want to kind of mention again, these first pages kind of tell you what components changed, how to arrange them. And we really meant this video as just a way to supplement this, to understand why these things changed.
Give me a
Now,
nod
in the coming
to
months,
fall fulfillment.
fall fulfillment. I just can't say it because I'm so worried about it. Okay, I'm gonna.
Is it too trepidatious?
No, I'm gonna pretend like everything Gardner shared today is the truth, and that it's all gonna go fine. It is looking like we will be fulfilling this project over the later fall, so something like shipping in late October, early November. It's our hope that by the time you get your copies, we will have videos that cover how to update your kit, how to port an old Chronicle to new foundations without losing too much of that lovely history and detail, too much of that patina. And we will also have some like proper refresh tutorials that will teach you all how to play the game. So we hope to see you there.